Committee for May 8th. I just want to point out if there are disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Excellent. Seeing none, there is no consent items, so we'll go on to the delegations. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting. That's interrupting councillors, staff, and other delegations, derogatory statements about councillor, staff, and others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. This is not added in here, but we usually have to remind sometimes, the comments from the delegations can be very passionate and shared by others in attendance, and you're compelled to feel like you want to give support, and that sometimes through clapping, that's not something that's allowed in the chambers, so please, if you can refrain from that. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following a presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. So this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. With that, we'll head on to item 5.1, and that's the official plan amendment application and zoning bylaw amendment application for 550 Lancaster Street West and 26 Bridge Street West. With that, Andrew Pennell, who is our senior planner, will provide 5-minute presentation for this item. Mr. Pennell, whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes. And just as a reminder, there are written submissions that have been sent to council. Sorry, quickly, I'll just point those out to the committee's reference point, and that's through Matthew Maines, Robert Howe, Goodman, LLP, Ellen Manage, and Sean Campbell. So again, Mr. Pennell, you please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Singh, members of the committee. Before you today are planning applications for two separate properties. 528 to 550 Lancaster Street West is the first set of applications. There's an OPA official plan amendment and ZBA zoning bylaw amendment. And we are also going to be discussing 26 Bridge Street West, a zoning bylaw amendment, or ZBA. The applications for the subject properties are related. That's why they're discussed in the same staff report. If approved, these applications would facilitate the relocation of two dwellings with heritage interest from 544 and 546 Lancaster Street West to 26 Bridge Street West for use as single detached dwellings with additional dwelling units. The subject lands addressed as 528 to 550 Lancaster would be redeveloped for high-rise residential development. The subject lands on Lancaster are located on the east side of Lancaster Street between Bridgeport Road and Bridge Street. They have a frontage of approximately 170 meters and a site area of 1.7 hectares or 4 acres. The lands are irregular in shape and contain 3 occupied low-rise residential dwellings addressed as 544 and 546 and 550 Lancaster Street. The former 2 dwellings are listed on the Heritage Kitchener inventory. The property addressed as 528 Lancaster Street West contains a recently constructed 10-story multiple dwelling. A tire shop is located to the northeast of the subject lands. The 2 properties immediately north are zoned for mixed-use development and contain single detached dwellings, one of which is owned by the tire shop. The property to the east is developed as a professional office, as it is currently unoccupied. The property to the south is the Tim Hortons restaurant. The properties on the opposite side of Lancaster Street are within the Lancaster urban corridor. They're designated mixed use and are developed with a mix of low-rise residential and low-rise commercial uses. Beyond the Lancaster urban corridor, approximately 70 meters west of the subject lands on Lancaster, is the low low-rise residential neighborhood serviced by General Drive and Lang Crescent. The subject property on Bridge Street is located approximately 420 meters north of the subject lands on Lancaster, on the north side of Bridge Street, west between Welch Street and the roundabout at Bridge and Lancaster. The property has approximately 20 meters of frontage on the north side of Bridge Street and is about 0.12 hectares in area, or 0.3 acres. The property is rectangular in shape and undeveloped. The property is also sloped towards Laurel Creek and the Grand River, which are both located to the east. The property to the west is developed with a low-rise multiple residential building, and the property to the east is developed with a dwelling that is identified on the Kitchener Heritage Inventory as a property of interest. The map on the screen is an excerpt of map 3, which is in the Kitchener official plan. This is the land use plan. The subject lands on Lancaster are primarily located within an urban corridor, and they are designated and zoned for mixed-use development. Urban corridors are a type of primary intensification area in the city's official plan. Highlights of permissions for this portion of the lands include a wide range of commercial and residential uses that are permitted. Floor space ratio range from 1.0 to a maximum of 4.0, and a maximum building height of 25 meters or 8 stories. A smaller portion of the lands is located within the Lancaster Business Park and is designated and zoned for business park employment uses. Highlights of permissions for those lands include a limited range of industrial employment uses that are permitted, no minimum or maximum floor space ratio, and no maximum building height. The applicant is requesting an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, again, OPA and ZBA for brevity, for these lands to permit redevelopment with high-rise residential land uses. The property on Bridge Street. The subject property is split zoned, low-rise residential and natural heritage conservation, the official plan. However, it is the only part that is only the part that is designated low-rise residential that is subject to the subject ZBA. Current permissions allow a limited number of low-rise residential uses, for example, single detached dwellings, additional dwelling units detached, and additional dwelling units attached. A general regulation in the zoning applies to all lands that are low-rise residential to permit only one single detached dwelling or semi-detached dwelling on a lot. The applicant is requesting a ZBA for this property to permit 2 dwellings with heritage interest to be addressed as, again, 544 and 546 Lancaster to be relocated to Bridge Street. The purpose of the requested OPA for the subject lands is, there are several reasons. A, to change the land use designation of the portion of the subject lands designated business park employment to mixed use. B, to remove the lands from specific policy area 9, which is the Lancaster Business Park area, from specific policy area 15, and remove the lands from specific policy area 15, which is the Lancaster Urban Corridor, on the specific policy areas map of the official plan. C, it is to add specific policy area 64 for the whole of the lands on the specific policy areas map. And lastly, it is to add a new site-specific policy area policy to permit maximum building height of 110 meters and 34 stories, as well as to increase the floor space ratio to 7.5. The main purpose of the requested associated ZBA is to change the zoning from mixed 2 with a site-specific provision and general business park zoning with site-specific provisions to mixed 2 with a new site-specific provision. The site-specific provision that's proposed includes many regulations, the main ones being a maximum building height of 110 meters and 34 stories in height, A maximum number of stories within 40 meters distance of the Lancaster Street right-of-way of 18 stories, a maximum floor space ratio of 7.5. There are provisions, several provisions related to urban design, such as street line step backs and maximum number of stories in the base of a mid-rise or tall building, and the percentage of street line facade openings. There's also a regulation to deal with a rear yard setback reduction to 4.2 meters. And there are also parking regulations, 3 of them. Firstly, to require a minimum parking rate for dwelling units of 0.6 per dwelling unit, to have a 0.1 space per unit visitor parking rate, and to establish a live-work unit parking rate of 1 space for every 67 square meters of floor area. There are other provisions as well. However, these are the main ones that I've gone over. In addition, there is a holding provision that is proposed to be applied. It is several parts, and this holding provision would prevent development until certain conditions have been fulfilled. These include the requirement for a relocation and conservation plan regarding 544 and 546 Lancaster. That would have to be submitted to the satisfaction of the city. A transportation impact study to the satisfaction of the region, a functional servicing report and detailed grading plan and stormwater management report to the satisfaction of the region, a detailed transportation and stationary noise study to the satisfaction of the region, and lastly, a record of site condition and ministry acknowledgement letter to the satisfaction of the region. The requested amendments would facilitate the redevelopment of the subject lands on Lancaster with the development concept shown on the screen. This development consists of 5 high-density residential buildings containing nearly 1,300 dwelling units plus 20 live-work units. And live-work units, in this case, are defined as units that can be converted from residential to commercial use and vice versa. The applicant advises that the development would be a purpose-built rental project consisting of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The development includes a combination of structured and surface parking, which together would provide 917 parking spaces. Amenity spaces are located within each building, and shared outdoor common amenity spaces are located above the 4th-story parking structure, which is located between buildings C and D shown on the plan. And this area totals approximately 2,000 square meters of amenity space. And there's also a common amenity space that's outdoor on the rooftop of building B, and that is approximately 1,100 square meters in area. Additional common outdoor amenity areas are distributed throughout the site at ground level. A conceptual rendering is shown on the screen, and it shows a view to the proposed development from the intersection of Bridgeport Road and Lancaster Street West. An existing Tim Hortons restaurant is shown in the foreground, and an existing multiple dwelling, which is between 8 and 10 stories, is shown as well directly behind the Tim Hortons at 528 Lancaster Street. On the screen is a conceptual rendering showing a view of the proposed development from the bridge on Bridge Street, over the bridge over the Grand River. To facilitate the relocation of the 2 dwellings with heritage interest, the owners requested a ZBA to add a site-specific provision to the current Res 2 zone. The main purpose of this ZBA is to permit 2 single detached dwellings on the lot, since only 1 is permitted under the current zoning. The provision would also permit each dwelling to contain 1 additional dwelling unit, as I mentioned. Additionally, a provision would not require the typical visual barrier between the parking lot and the adjacent residential property, in this case 20 Bridge Street West. And this would ensure that the view to the relocated heritage houses is maintained from the roundabout, as well as for aesthetic purposes in as well as for aesthetic purposes. In addition, a holding provision is also proposed for this zoning bylaw amendment to ensure the following plans and materials are submitted prior to relocation of the buildings. Firstly, an urban design brief is required, and this would include the need for a landscape plan and planting plan related to the design and screening of retaining walls, and that'd be to the satisfaction of the city, and a detailed grading and stormwater management plan and servicing plan to the satisfaction of the region. The requested amendments would facilitate the proposed development concept shown on the screen. This includes placement of 2 buildings on the site to be relocated. 2 buildings would be used as single detached dwellings, each with an additional dwelling unit. Essentially a duplex for a total of 4 dwelling units on the property. The dwellings are proposed to be positioned such that they are perpendicular to Bridge Street. In this way, both buildings would be visible as one travels west from the roundabout at Bridge and Lancaster towards Woolwich Street. It should be noted that the applicants advise that the existing tenants will be offered affordable units within the existing 528 Lancaster Street West building, and that details are being worked out individually between tenants and the developer. On the screen is a conceptual rendering that shows the proposed dwellings to be relocated, and those are shown on the left. The existing dwelling, 20 Bridge Street, is shown for context, and it's on the right. And I would suggest that this these development proposals represent an opportunity for Lancaster. The committee has an opportunity to greatly increase the housing supply and residential density within an urban corridor. Specifically, this proposal will add approximately 1,300 dwelling units to the city, which the applicant advises will be rental apartments. This is a significant community benefit during a housing crisis. The proposal also adds a mixed-use component through the provision of 20 live-work units. And it also locates the tallest buildings furthest away from Lancaster Street, while orienting shorter buildings within with pedestrian scale bases and live-work units towards Lancaster Street. For 26 Bridge Street, the application will facilitate the conversion of 2 buildings with heritage interest and help ensure their continued use as viable dwellings for years to come. It will facilitate the low-rise residential development of and grading improvements to a property that has been undevelopable for an indefinite period of time, by my count, at least 27 years. And it would grant granting approval to this zoning bylaw amendment would facilitate redevelopment at the Lancaster Street property. In the case of both sites, again, holding provisions are proposed to ensure technical matters are resolved prior to development occurring. And this is my conclusion. Planning staff is of the opinion that the subject applications are consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. They conform to the growth plan and the regional official policies plan, as well as the city of Kitchener official plan, and they represent good planning. Accordingly, planning staff recommends that the OPA be adopted and the 2 ZBAs be approved. Thank you, and I'm here for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pennell. And this presentation that you've gone through, that's been sent to committee?
This presentation has been sent to the clerk's department.
Okay. If it can be circulated to the committee as well, I think it summarizes the report fairly well of the reliefs that are being sought for. So if it hasn't been sent, if that can be done. Now, it's to the committee, if you can hold your questions. We have a huge list of other delegations, and then we will come back. So as the delegations, sorry? No, so that's what I was trying to get at. We usually hold questions of staff till after we hear from the delegations. And the other advantage of that is, as we hear from the delegations and they arise additional questions of staff from that, you can just jot that down. So in the end, we can get clarity for whatever the delegations may have raised through their concerns, and you can get that clarity from staff at the end of it. And with that, I think on paper, the very least, we have about 12-plus delegations, so it's going to be a lengthy day, a lengthy process, and to be respectful for everyone that's in the chambers and anyone that's viewing, please, if you can try to keep your questions concise, do your best to not repeat the question that may have already been asked from additional committee member. The end result is we would hope to get clarity from the delegation and then hold questions from staff afterwards. With that, we'll first go to Pierre Chavon, that's with MHBC. And Pierre, you are presenting in person, so please, whenever you're ready. And you have 5 minutes to make your delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a planner and a partner at MHBC Planning. Here on behalf of Corley Development and Vive Development, who are joint developers on this project. With me this afternoon is Mr. Stephen Litt with Vive. He's registered as a delegation after me and will speak to this as well. And so I believe we both have 5 minutes. I don't want to take a lot of time in repeating what Mr. Pennell has done very well at summarizing the application. We do obviously want to say that we support the staff recommendation. We're here in support of the comments that were made. And I just have a few slides to illustrate a few other points that Mr. Pennell has highlighted. And starting with one of the last slides he had is the view from the Grand, and really as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to bring much needed rental housing to our community. This is a unique opportunity that we have that doesn't come by too often, with such a large property on the Grand River to provide great views of our Canadian Heritage River, and for bringing, like I said, much needed rental housing within this established urban corridor. Won't belabor this, we all know where the location, but I would say this is, as Mr. Pennell noted, within an established urban corridor, which is identified as a primary intensification area. This is not unlike some of your other urban corridors, for example, King Street urban corridor, where a lot of the intensification around the Ion is occurring. This is the same designation within the city's urban structure. We are applying for some increases in floor space ratio and height for sure, but again, we believe this is an appropriate site. It is a 4-acre site. It's probably the largest consolidated site within the Lancaster corridor, and it presents, again, a great opportunity for intensification, surrounded by employment to the north, east, and south. We've got Lancaster, which is planned to be a 26-meter right-of-way, and planned to be improved by the region, with all the low-rise residential to the west, which is interfaced, I should note, by further mixed uses along Lancaster, which are zoned to permit up to 8 stories in height. This again is the site plan that Mr. Pennell showed. There are, yes, a total of 5 buildings, but actually 4 are being proposed. A is actually built. That is the one next to the Tim Hortons. B is along Lancaster, so Lancaster is on the left-hand side of the image, and it is going to be 12 stories with some stepping to provide for that transition and some articulation ability to soften the height, with some at-grade mixed uses, live-work units. Building E is 18 stories, again with mixed or live-work units at grade to again activate that street. And the taller buildings are C and D, C being the tallest at the rear. You can see the green areas are the rooftop amenity space on top of A, B, and in between D and C. I should note that what's not shown on here is the 2 levels of underground parking. So there is some surface parking here, and that's really for some of the visitors and deliveries and whatnot, but most of the parking is all underground and not visible from the public realm. These are just some site statistics. You can see at the very top graph or table the summary of the buildings A, B, C, and D, as I noted. The height, the 3rd column, is identifying the various heights. So we've got a lot of change in articulation and variety in the skyline, which is encouraged through urban design. We've put all the mass and height towards the back of the property, as far removed from the low-rise residential areas as possible. And in total, with the live-work units, there's 1,301 units with about over 917 parking spaces with over 1,000 indoor bicycle storage spaces. This is just an image of the view looking from Lancaster. You can see with the different elements and colors and materials, we can provide sort of that base, that darker color, sort of that 8-story, 6-story base that helps bring the mass down towards Lancaster, makes it feel more of a pedestrian-friendly environment within the stepping and the changes in colors and materials which on the upper levels. We have heard about concerns about shadow. Here are a few next slides on the shadow. This is the spring equinox at 10 o'clock at the top left, 2 o'clock top right, 4 bottom left, and 6 o'clock bottom right. So again, other than in the morning, the shadows are cast onto Lancaster Street predominantly. After that is cast towards the Grand River and onto the employment areas. So really not impacting the low-rise residential areas to the west. This is the summer. Sun is much higher in the sky, and the shadows are a lot more contained. We've looked at sort of how that angular plane looks from various vantage points. You'll see Lancaster Street in the middle of the image, the various buildings, B, E, D, and C. We've noted the buildings on the opposite side of Lancaster, which the zoning permits up to 8 stories. So with that potential for 8 stories, the views to the site, or the sight lines, are quite impeded. And in fact, you can see as you get further away, you will be able to see them, but it's quite a distance away from the proposed development. This is tied to Bridge Street. We've heard about that. I'm not going to talk about that, but in too much detail. But the 2 buildings that are proposed to be relocated, they're not listed, they're not designated. However, we are proposing to relocate them to 26 Bridge. What is unique about them is that actually they're built close together. It's a very unique situation, and that's what we want to try to keep by relocating the buildings to 26 Bridge, is that orientation towards the Grand, which is what it'll look like on 26 Bridge. They will be close together, and they will be retained for housing. So again, here are some images in the site plan that Mr. Pinnell went through, and those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. There is one question. Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Sorry, actually, is Mr. Lick going to be making a presentation as well?
Mr. Litt's making a presentation afterwards. All right, Pierre, that's everyone. And Mr. Litt and Ms. Campbell, is Ms. Campbell presenting too, or it'll be just yourself?
Just me. I'm here for questions. I'll keep the process moving forward. So
excellent, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So Mr. Litt's not necessarily presenting, it's already been presented through Mr. Chauvin, but if you'd like to ask questions of Mr. Litt, go ahead. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions. The first, I think, might be more appropriate for staff, but I'm curious on your take, or your planner's take. One of the things I was hoping to see come out of this proposal was a response to the traffic complications on Lancaster. Now, I understand that that's not being resolved here and it's going to be taking place presumably after whatever council decides. Have you engaged with the region at all in terms of how they propose to deal with the traffic issues?
Yeah, we have. I think it's probably best turn over to staff to comment on that.
Yeah, okay,
there's
no problem.
lots of discussion.
I also noted that the proposed development is largely 1 and 2 bedroom units. I know sometimes, it wasn't in the report, but sometimes some of those units are associated with, they have a den included as well.
Yep.
Do any of these 1 and 2 bedroom units have dens, and do you know offhand how many?
Yeah, there's over 300 2-bedroom plus dens. So those would be suitable for a family.
300, so that'll be a 3rd room. Okay, that's important. The other question I wanted to ask, and it's putting a bit of a cart before the horse, but in the last development in this area, there was significant concern about the construction period and specifically adjacent Lang Crescent being used as a staging area. What assurances can you give me? Is this new site, is it large enough that all of the staging can be accommodated on that site, or is this something that my residents should be concerned about?
Lang, yeah, I think probably, just thinking when 528 Lancaster was built, the first building, so our driveway sort of lines up exactly with Lang, which I have a feeling when the servicing was going in, the construction vehicles just defaulted to that direction, so that access will largely remain for existing residents of 528. Again, there's construction and all the challenges that come with that, but we can do a better job at traffic flows and signage and such, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's something we're going to have to be more
Yeah.
clear on going forward. The last question I want to touch upon was the movement of the two homes on the property.
Sure.
I know this wasn't referenced in the report, but I understand it's council's purview to decide whether they want to take that action or possibly not move those homes in lieu of a potential contribution of the equivalent cost of movement. Is that something that you would be prepared to entertain?
Yeah, I think this committee and eventually council's, like, their important decision is to figure out what's best for the community. Is it affordable housing? Is it heritage? Is it other community spaces? So absolutely open to that discussion.
Have you had any quotations, or do you have an estimated cost of what it might be to move those homes?
Yeah, roughly speaking, the incremental cost, so if you take 26 Bridge and you built something similar on it, to get those two houses over there would be about $650,000.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
650. Okay.
Just for clarity, is that each or for the?
No, that's total. Yeah. Yeah.
Total. Thank you. Okay, those are all my questions for now. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I think we have 4 additional. I hate to be a stickler. I just want to remind the committee and ask what you need to ask. But we do have My Ideal City, as I was reminded by Mayor Rabinovich a little bit earlier, and we have a lot of delegations with that as well. And so just do your best to make sure that you are concise. Thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Litt. As Councillor Davey talked about moving the homes, what's involved in moving a home? Do they get stripped down inside first? Can you explain a bit of that process?
Yeah, so you poke a few holes in the foundation. I'm going to oversimplify. You drag steel beams through. You obviously jack up the outside walls, make sure they're secure. In the process, the houses get gutted, right? So minimize the weight and obviously ensure the best likelihood of a successful transport. But it's an endeavor. It happens sometimes, but it doesn't happen often. So it's not without challenges, without to say the least. So.
Okay, and would there be some sort of the risks of moving houses this size and this age? I know it's probably a specialized company that would do this, so...
Yeah, there's a few companies that do this in Ontario. Doesn't happen often in the middle of the city. But yeah, there's definitely risk in the process, for sure.
Okay, and as you talk about the site that you would move the homes to...
Yes.
Just wondering, if those homes weren't moved, how many units would you think, and maybe this is a staff question too, that could be approved on a site that size? So,
yeah, it's a good question. I think just given you're working with the existing footprint of the houses, if those were kind of optimized to get the most amount of housing, you could probably get 3 townhouses with 2 units each, so say 6. So you get net 2 additional units on the bridge site.
Okay, and the question too, I think Councillor Davey drilled in on it a bit, but with the money saved, could there be some community benefit that you could come up with?
For sure. Open to ideas, as always.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just a question too about the live-work residences.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit? Would that be something where someone could, is it partially live in the unit and work in another section of the unit, or is it just convertible?
Picture a 2-story townhouse. So the main floor is open concept space with sort of a powder room that's barrier-free accessible, so an artisan can have a studio, amongst many other things. And then up a set of stairs internal to that is sort of a living quarters, right? So The best example I can think of offhand that's been around for the longest would be on the Seagren Lofts, right across from the Basilius School. So they're a two-floor suite with a little bit of patio space outside, so
Okay,
all in one, yeah.
there could be the potential for a bit of an artist
So,
community.
yeah, for sure. I mean, that second floor doesn't have to be there. It can be a larger open void space for creative stuff, et cetera. So, yeah, we haven't gone down that design route yet, so,
Okay, thank you.
for sure, no problem.
Councillor Clancy.
Thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, how many units of housing will be lost, like of the existing? How many units do you have on those properties in question?
Yeah, there's one single-family house, there's the two duplexed houses, and there's an addition off the back, so we'll call it 5 apartments plus 1 home.
Okay, so 6 units.
Yeah.
And can you describe your plans to support tenants that are at risk of displacement through this project?
Yeah, we have offered, and again, subject to details, but we've offered the existing residents to move into 528 Lancaster, so we have the benefit of having a building that's complete, and we're renting it up now, so those folks can move over if they wish, at the same rents they have today, and our plan is to phase those rents up to sort of market rates, market rate being CMHC's mid-market affordable rent, so $1,400-ish over a 5-year term. And again, it's lots of details to work out, but I got into the details.
Well, those details to me are important.
Absolutely.
You know, we're facing an affordable housing crisis too, right? So,
Absolutely.
and I know you came to us recently with a project that didn't also include, I think it was a week ago, without affordable housing included in it, and
Right.
so I believe in intensification. I believe that we need to have more units online. I guess I also want that projects come forward that consider potential harm that's done. So to me, displacement is harm.
Councillor
So-
Clancy,
Yeah,
if you could just hold your,
Okay,
yeah,
question.
if you could hold your comments,
Yeah.
yes.
Is there any accommodations that could be made? We're kind of raising a woodlot of 211 mature trees. Is there any accommodations you could make to recognize that more fully?
Yeah, losing trees sucks, without a doubt. I mean, I'm first to admit. We have a site is zoned for appropriate housing. There's a compensation plan, so we'll have to write a significant check and/or compensate through the detailed site plan process on 520 to 550 Lancaster. So part of this plan is we approached the region on the roundabout, the bottom of the hill, sort of where Bridge meets Lancaster. It's a parking lot now, so we wanted to actually take our parkland dedication money through the site plan process to improve that land with a park. So that's just a void gravel parking lot that used to have a building on it. That should be a green space. That's in the GRC floodplain. It just makes a ton of sense that would be improved. That would be where new trees that are indigenous to our community get planted. So that's our hope. That what comes of this. So to answer your question, there's a policy for compensating planning on sites in the city of Kitchener where housing is being built.
Can I ask, maybe this is something staff could follow up with me after, like the compensation seemed meager for the value of mature trees versus new trees. I'd just love to learn more about how we come to that dollar amount, because my understanding is that planting a single tree can be quite expensive depending on the age of that tree. So those numbers, I'd love to learn more about those numbers at a future time if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Councillor Singh, and thank you, Mr. Litt, for the presentation. Just a few questions. So there's 1,200 in total units, 1,000 bike spots. How did we come up to that number for bike spots?
It's a great question. We have transportation engineers that we hire, and of course the region and city have transportation staff that suggest what is good now, what's good in the future. So it's probably, given today's cycling needs, it's probably a lot more than is being utilized, but going forward, that seems to be what the professionals agree upon is the right ratio of bikes to residents.
Okay, and then the visitor spaces are 0.1 per unit. Is that, maybe staff can answer that, is that unusually low for rental?
It's pretty standard. We find that when projects get bigger, you actually have more ebbs and flows, so you can actually use less than that, but that's, again, those transportation engineers have advised it's the right mix.
Okay, and then, so I guess, maybe staff can answer this as well. Transportation down there. What, is there public transportation in that area?
If you can just jot that down as a question of staff, we'll come back to staff.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
It'll just help you as we go through all the delegations, just jot down all the questions for clarity.
Gotcha.
And that'll help the delegations as well to get the answers that they raise as part of the delegation. Awesome, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Singh, and thanks, Mr. Litt, for coming in. I want to go along with the questions with regards to moving those homes. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of difficulty with doing that. When you move those homes, what is actually being moved? Is it just the shell, or is it, if you can just give me a little more detail?
You would have the roof, the double brick veneer, the floor joists, and a bunch of temporary steel to support them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the interior really is not going to, it won't be preserved at all then?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I just have a question. First, this is a beautiful property that's being developed, no question, and there's a lot of cost, both with trees and your cost as well. I just need a visual of the high-rise that's closest to the Grand River. How many units? So how many homes will have that view?
Yeah, great question. So for lack of a better, it's a large triangle, which is nice for a change. Usually it's much simpler to plan buildings on a square. But because of the way the triangle is oriented, the two back towers are staggered from one another. So they both have views of that meandering Grand River as it passes through the Bridge Street roundabout. So if we pull up, and I don't have control of the mouse, but if you pull up that list, or the unit list that was in Pierre's, it's the two highest buildings have wonderful views of the river, plus A, B, C, D, E. 500 and the two rear towers,
So
which is great.
500 homes would have a view of the...
Which is rare. Like, we don't, a lot of urban centers throughout the world are built on water, and Kitchener's not for whatever reason, being its industrial roots. But this is an opportunity to celebrate that, which we think is pretty awesome. So.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that's all the questions of the committee. I just have a couple, Mr. Litt, so if you can be patient, just a few moments longer. You've already been asked about the substantive, and I guess say engineering feat of moving two heritage homes that are quite old, so they do have structural complexities to do so. Because the inside, you said, will be completely gutted, nothing of the inside will be kept.
Right.
So it'll be back to beam.
Correct.
And it's really the outside preservation. And in most cases, it's the front that's visible. Being in a private property, it's the front that's visible to anyone that's going by and appreciating that heritage reflection.
Yep.
Have you considered using the facade as part of the development? So using the brick, it's not like we haven't done this before.
Yep.
Duke Street Tower is one of them. At the very least, you save on the cost, and perhaps that's something we can talk about, the community benefit,
Sure.
while still on-site preserving the importance of that heritage characteristics.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, again, it's, we can't get too far into the detailed design process before we have sort of high-level approval, right? So we can take that away and talk about it with staff. On-site, yeah, there will definitely be a plaque commemorating these two houses and such, right? Again, all those details to be worked out. The real two interesting things, these here, they're not on any lists. They're not. They're two old houses that have a lot of character, charm, that are located close together. That's, I think everyone agrees, that's sort of their interest. Is that more important than affordable housing? I personally don't think so. But without a doubt, we need to make sure that we're making the right decision to be commemorated. Yeah. So
that's the conversation we can have, but this is the opportunity for us to really dig a little deeper with you. So there would be some consideration of commitments from you, of course, your organization that you represent, And that's something that we can get clarity from our staff. So being a housing provider, it's one thing, a developer that builds for condos and then they move on to the next thing. There's no strong ownership with what the product that they build.
Right.
You guys are quite different. You will
Yep.
build it, you will own it, you will operate it.
Correct.
So having said that, because of 600,000 plus price tag,
Yep.
if there's some, basis of saving that monies through some sort of commemoration or facade attainment of the existing homes, could you as a housing provider offset, provide deep discounts for a number of discounts for a lengthy period, say 10 years, 20 years,
Sure.
based on the CMHC guidelines, what's considered as an affordable housing units? Is that something you can commit to?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, all right, good. With that, that's all the questions to you.
Thank you.
We will go on to, again, Ms. Campbell's not presenting, so thank you for saving that time. We will all move on to the other delegations. Jennifer Adams. Ms. Adams, thank you for coming in person, and you have 5 minutes to make your delegations.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, delegations, city staff, and guests, my name is Jennifer Adams, and I am here in support of the Lancaster development. I have lived in Kitchener for over 40 years in the downtown area, and I'm just delighted at the influx of people and the richness they bring to our city. I'd like to start by talking about tort law. I understand that that doesn't really apply in this case, but it does give an indication of the Canadian sensibility. As you all know, Canadian tort law is based on the rights of the group, not, as in the United States, the rights of the individual. You folks swore a wonderful oath to do your best for our city, not a specific neighborhood. Our city, in my opinion, is going to be highly enriched by the influx of people who are going to be involved in business, in the arts, and in all sorts of things that are going to do nothing but make our city better. The City of Kitchener has already conducted a survey, and the results of that are that we have got to go up. We can't go out. We can't build an LRT out to Baden and beyond. Well, I suppose we could, but probably not going to do that. This project accomplishes that and another crucial goal, which is its target residents. As I understand it, the target residents for this project are those making about $60,000 to $100,000 a year. Gosh to golly, we need so much housing so desperately. This project going forward will enable people in the, I think it's called the housing spectrum, to move up and then clear out some lower rental places, hopefully. There is not only a desperate need for housing in our region to meet our commitment to the province, our federal government has said, we've got to get more housing. There's also the added bonus of the tax base. That's going to bring in more money for the city, and with that money, the city's going to be able to do and support those who don't have homes, transportation, arts. It's just a real, I don't know, it's an opportunity that, in my view, should not be missed. I'd like to talk a little bit, gosh, that clock is intimidating. I'd like to talk a little bit about the integrity of the process. VIVE has a long history in this region. They do right by us. They do. Mr. Litt was born and raised here and gives back to the community. Anybody who's coming forward with, well, issues, I just want to talk briefly about shade and sun. You know, in a global warming planet, we might be crying out for shade in just a couple of years, and that might not be a bad thing at all, to have more of it. Any damage or issues that might come up. Vive has a long history of integrity, following engineering protocols. I believe Mr. Litt will not let people down. If something is going to damage their existing home, I don't think he's going to allow it. I really don't. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is the polarization we're all facing after COVID. You mentioned at the beginning there were very strong feelings. And by the way, I'm very glad people are that committed to their neighborhood and their neighbors, that they're willing to sort of stand up. My view is that
Ms. Adams, if you can start summarizing, please. You have 5 minutes. If you can start summarizing, please.
I don't know what you said.
If you can start to summarize your comments.
Oh, yeah, this is the last. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. That took 10 seconds. We've been polarized with COVID, just as people were polarized after World War II. There was a horrible Red Scare, McCarthyism. Mr. Litt's not a big bad developer twirling a mustache. He gives back to the community. And I'd like to cite Reception House. Oh my gosh. Okay. The Yeti Arts Night at Zumba, and the fact that he gave the region, at cost, the Schwaben Club for homeless. This can do nothing but enrich our city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate your comments, and you put forward a lot of cogent points forward for us to consider. On to next one, and I just want to remind, just being a little bit of stickler today, and my apologies to delegations and the committee, but we have eager young people that take part of our Ideal City, that's at 5 o'clock, and I don't want to disappoint and delay. Sorry, 5:30, so gives us an extra half hour. But if you see that the delegation before you has made certain points, and it's a repetition of similar points, try to, add some additional information to the committee that would be beneficial for us. So on to Tiffany Baroque, that's in person. Tiffany, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. So good afternoon, City Council members, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time today. A lot of the points I wanted to make or concerns I had were already addressed, so this will be a little bit shorter. I just wanted to start with saying I grew up in Bridgeport, so I, as a little girl, walked past these houses. I dreamed of what it would be like to live in them with their big trees and all the little animals running around, and it's a very, very special place. If there's anything I could say to stop this from happening, I would say it. I understand how badly we need housing. So I know that it's unlikely that this project can be stopped at this point. My biggest concern is the displacement of the residents. This is the 3rd time this has happened to my daughter and I. My rent in the past 6 years has doubled, and now I'm looking at it doubling again. And while Mr. Litt did bring up that he offered us places, I don't have any offer on the table. I've actually had no communication from Vive or Corley whatsoever. Not one. I found out about this project by a billboard on my front lawn. That's completely unacceptable. I'm a widowed, Indigenous, permanently disabled mother. My daughter has a mental disability. I already work 70 hours a week. I have 3 jobs. My daughter has 2 and goes to high school full-time. It shouldn't be this hard to survive in this region. I have volunteered with numerous community developments. Both of my parents were presidents of the Bridgeport Lions Club. I volunteered with the Bridgeport Community Association, with the local Army cadets. My daughter is the recipient of a Duke of Edinburgh Award. Mr. Mayor, you presented it to her. I have given back to the city as much as I can. I just want to know that we have a safe place to sleep at night. I work from home. This is a huge impact on our life. So I just ask that you guys take that into consideration.
Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate you sharing your personal story, and I think tenant displacement will be a focus of our discussion with our staff as well. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. Sir, you currently reside in one of the homes that's proposed to be moved?
I do, at 544 unit number 4.
Okay. Yeah, nothing else, just want to let you know that we'll make sure that those connections are made in
All right,
advance, okay?
thank you.
Oh, Tiffany, there's a few more that have keyed in.
Sorry.
That's okay. Councilor O'Dooney.
Thank you. I just wanted clarity. So from what I'm understanding, you did not receive a notice to move?
No, not yet. And I mean, I know we're still in the planning, so maybe that's not something that is immediate for them, but the communication hasn't been there. Like, I mean, we do have one resident who speaks with Mr. Litt on behalf of all of us, which is great, but it just would have been nice to know what's going on. It's incredibly stressful, especially with my daughter. Like, she's got a anxiety and personality disorder. She's actually right there. And so it's the impact it's had on her mental health is insane.
Okay, and just as, once more, as what Councillor Davey has said, the opportunity of this meeting can also be, you have Mr. Litt, Ms. Campbell, as representatives in the meeting. At the end of the meeting, hopefully they can engage with you and provide some contact information.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Oh,
Thank you.
Councillor Clancy again. She keyed in twice, 3 times, back and forth. She's finally made up her mind. Councillor Clancy.
Can you just, I feel like it's important that you're sharing your lived experience today, so I want to thank you for coming. Can you describe what it will mean for your family if you do have to pay double your rent in the coming months?
I'm not sure we'll have a place to live at all. The competition for affordable housing in the city is insane. I don't have good credit. I grew up impoverished, and I fought really, really hard to get to a place where I don't have to worry about finances. And I don't think I could find another place to live, especially in the place that I've lived my entire life. Bridgeport is my home.
Thank you.
That's all the questions. Once again, I know this can be a huge trigger, especially of us dwelling deep and asking these questions of you. Again, I remind you that Mr. Litt is in the room. Try to connect with him. We'll ask questions of staff as well. And it's an opportunity for this committee, this council, the developers to work together to see if we can offset some of that impact. So we'll definitely be asking those questions. Thank you
All right.
once more. All right.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, well done.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right. And then next is Alicia Berlinger. My apologies.
Hello, Council.
Hi, Alicia. Go ahead. You have
Hi.
5 minutes to make your delegation.
Yeah, Alicia. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time, both previous to this and consultation, as well as today. And everyone who came out, thank you so much for being here. As a community member, a taxpayer, a local artist, and a resident, as well as someone who has traveled to some of the most successful, beautifully planned cities in the world, I'm here to share why I believe this development proposal is not viable and should be rejected by council. There are many reasons why it's poorly planned, and you'll hear those reasons from concerned residents throughout the next few hours. But I'll share with you my most salient perspectives as a current resident as well on the premises. I've lived in Kitchener for 20 years plus, recording albums, working with local organizations, performing, volunteering, collaborating, and also helping spotlight KW as I travel. Every time I'd go somewhere internationally, people would say, "Where do you live?" And I'd say, "Kitchener." They're like, "Where is that?" And nowadays, you can reference Justin Bieber, right? But it used to be me, right? It used to be me. I've watched the city change drastically, and while change is necessary for a growing city, I feel that it has to happen with a thoughtfulness that honors how important these decisions are in a day and age such as this, especially in the housing crisis. I know we need housing. We're in a housing crisis. It's not affordable. This proposal does not address the issue of affordability whatsoever. And we can tell you that as people who are renters. I'm not sure how many council members are renters. You can put up your hand if you're a renter. Okay, cool. Stephen, are you a renter? No, okay. So I'm here to tell you about what renting is like as someone who rents. We spent as a community with our tax dollars over $900 million, that's almost $1 billion, on the light rail transit system. And I believe the big tenet of building that was to build high-density residential units along its artery so that we could plan the city in a way that's easy to move through as people who use public transit, so that services like schools, grocery stores, they're all sort of centralized. This development does not fit within that whatsoever. It's so far from light rail and the transit system. We should be building where the ecological impact has already been done, where there's already been concrete laid. We're not going to be further impacting the wildlife corridor along the Grand River. I keep hearing urban corridor, but there's also a wildlife corridor. We have deer, eagles, foxes, and they all use this area to travel between the Grand River and Laurel Creek. So beyond the ecological impact, this has been a community hub, and I know the council is familiar with what these houses look like. Everyone who drives by says, oh my God, who lives there? Are they witches? Are they lesbians? Are they artists? Yes, all of that. All of those things. We are there, and we create the cool, edgy parts of the city that honestly platform it internationally, and I'm not afraid to say that. This land has been used for music gatherings, music festivals. There have been albums written there, songs. There's a recording studio that I run there out of my house. It's a home to Indigenous families, like I said, to us LGBTQ plus families and marginalized people in our city. We have gardens where we grow food on the land, which with this proposal will be decimated. And that food growth is important for us. There's berries that are picked, wild berries, and the land is well tended to and stewarded by the families who have lived there, some of which for 40 years. I consulted an arborist, and they said they don't think the ancient trees should be cut down, and you really don't need to be an arborist to make that assessment. I think anyone who's driven by there will see the scale of the trees on that property. So the building next door, completed by Vive a year ago, is currently 50% empty. And I just want to make sure that the council knows that it's only 50% occupied. It's been there for a year. They're advertising for it. There's a leasing sign on it. I see ads on Instagram, on social media. Why isn't it filled? Why are we building 1,300 new units in the same location if that one hasn't been used yet? I would love council to ask that of the developers, because I'm not sure what the answer to that is. But I do think it's because it's a poor place to put high-density residents at the moment. I don't think it's the right spot. The provincial policy statement is alleged to be in line with this development, but from what I've read, it's not. This development doesn't feel like it honors the ecological aspects of developing. It also is very sprawling for the city, which maybe Doug Ford appreciates, but I know all of us who care about the green belt, both along the 401 and here in KW, don't think that sprawling is actually going to benefit us long term. So dealing with this, to echo what Tiffany said, has had a huge impact on our mental health and physical health as residents. I've had a nearly part-time, sometimes full-time job just researching what developments are in terms of their legalities and looking into the processes, and it's taken away from my work. It's been taking away from my work, the work that I do to ironically pay my rent to Vive. I'm not sure what other businesses a person can spend almost $50,000 on as a service user, myself in rent, and not receive an equitable conversation or the kind of respect that I would think any of the tenants who rent in the city deserve. I run a business as well. I know the City of Kitchener is a corporation, Vive's a corporation. Sunny Jam Records is a 15-year-old corporation that I run as a business owner. So I just want to thank you for your time. I think you'll hear a lot more from other residents, but I just want to say that I don't think this should be voted ahead, and I believe the council should consider all these points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud. Oh, there's questions of you if you feel comfortable answering.
Yeah.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question. What type of development, given that we are in a housing crisis, what type of development would you like to see along that area?
Yeah, thank you for asking.
What do you envision?
So I envision a lot of the pre-existing buildings that were once commercial buildings that people now work from home a lot out of being retrofitted. I think that at least my generation, the generation that is likely to rent and not be able to afford a house, actually like retrofitted loft-like quirky buildings. I think there's a market for that, and I think that there's a lot of buildings, especially downtown, that could be retrofitted by these developers to use as rental housing.
Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, just curious, we heard from the developer about working with you to find alternatives, but I'm hearing from you that that's not your experience.
We did have conversations, but nothing materialized, and also I did speak to my other fellow tenants to try and aggregate and, be stronger in numbers, but 5 didn't want to honor what we asked for either. So no, and also to put us in the building next door, some of you have seen the property. We're not going to be able to grow our food next door. We're not going to be able to pick berries next door. We won't have outdoor space and gathering space as community in the ways that we do to connect with the land right now. And I think that that's, not to mention the units will be smaller. We'll be put in smaller units for a higher price per square footage. And that's not really a deal. I know it says on their website they're good negotiators, but I think that we should talk. Maybe there's more that can be done. But also, I disagree with this proposal, so.
All right, thank you, Alicia. Just as a point, I don't want you to judge us too harshly. I can say for at least myself, maybe I don't rent right now, but in the past I have rented, and I can share with that experience, and I'm sure others around the Horseshoe can relate with that as well. And we get it.
No judgment. Hey, I would love to buy a house too. It was more just to point out, right now the rental market is an extremely volatile, stressful one, even more than when I rented 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I just wanted to highlight that I'm representing us who are being bounced around in the rental market.
I just wanted to share so you feel that we can share with your perspective.
I know you're from the streets. I get it. I get it. We see you. We feel you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Very much for
Appreciate it.
presenting. All right, you take care.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Dan. I think it's Boyceford. Dan, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Oh, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name is Dan Boisvert. I've been a resident of Kitchener-Waterloo for 56 years and have resided in the part of Kitchener-Waterloo formerly known as the Village of Bridgeport for approximately 35 of those years. I still have memories of the days when you could talk about making a left-hand turn down there with all the traffic. I'm here today because I have a real genuine concern for this proposed development that I think will not only affect Bridgeport, but will also ultimately affect the city and the region. I'm not going to give a complete history lesson here, but Bridgeport is very unique in its history and the diversity of the region. There are still a lot of fifth-generation residents that call that neighborhood home. Bridgeport has had a very high per capita rate of volunteer enlistments in both wars by families that still live there. The Shadow Lawn Apartments on the proposed site were actually owned by a former veteran, and the apartments, the old farmhouse was converted to apartments to create housing for veterans returning from the war. This property features many natural springs that supplied water at one time to a trout hatchery operation, trout streams, and ponds, and there was actually a pipeline that I dug up many years ago that ran over to the old Lancaster Hotel. They supplied the water there. As relayed to me by the previous and now deceased owner, the expansive gardens, gazebos, ponds, and landscaping were featured in a very early publication of Architectural Digest or Better Homes and Gardens. He couldn't recall but it was recognized as on a story that featured some of the most beautiful properties in North America. We frequently have sightings of deer, wolves, coyote, many smaller mammals on site, and a lot of the deer and the other indigenous fauna use that property as a corridor to move along the Grand River through the property site and over into Bechtel Park. And I'm sure there are a number of residents here that sightings of deer are not unfamiliar at all. For the people that transit through our area, they can recognize that we have very quick access to downtown Kitchener, downtown Waterloo, up until recently with the closure of Bridge Street. The north end of Waterloo was readily accessible, and you could also hop up the hill and jump on the expressway at University Avenue. A good part of the city can be circumvented by coming down, going over the bridge on Bridge Street, and making your way out to the airport, Breslau, or on to Guelph, and some commuters, I think, even go through Guelph and down the Hanlon out to Toronto. Development and growth and construction in recent years has bottlenecked traffic through the area, where I believe it is now arguably one of the worst parts of the city to travel through during the end-of-day travel times. If I can, I'd like to recount speaking to a councillor years ago, and he said it's the easiest part of the town to campaign in, because you can stand on the street corner at 5 o'clock at the corner of Bridgeport Road and Lancaster, and you get to talk to everybody in the ward while they're parked in traffic. I think parking will become absolutely disastrous with the addition of these 1,400 residences, and reduced parking schedules for requirements will undoubtedly spill over into the adjacent neighborhoods. In summary, I'd just like to say that I think allowing this project and proposed amendments is short-sighted and may ignore only a few of the aforementioned concerns, and the list will grow. I think, judging by the attendance of the residents here, I'm not alone in sharing these concerns. And I think with even further scrutiny, consideration, evaluation, the list will only grow. I think we need a comprehensive and long-term study. I sometimes find myself asking the question, musing, has the region simply grown and exceeded its carrying capacity? And we'll have to seek other alternatives. I don't think erecting high-rise, high-density housing in every available green space or vacant parking lot is really going to improve anybody's quality of life. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. There are no questions of you, so thank you very much for presenting. Next up is Ryan Cherbaldi. Ryan, welcome, and just as a reminder, again, 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Councilman, councilors, I'm not as affected as some of the people are here by living on the property, but I do live in the neighborhood. I walk by this proposed property once, twice daily, every day. When this project first got red lit, if you would, with as far as the zone change application notice, I had to call Mr. Pinnell because the sign that the developer had put up on the property was buried behind a construction fence that nobody could see, or nobody could even see from the road driving by. It took a couple days. He managed to get the sign moved and more exposed now. One of my biggest concerns in the neighborhood, the traffic situation. There was a traffic survey that was done by the developer. It was done during stage 1 of reopening after COVID, where capacity of retail businesses was 25%. There was nobody on the roads those days. I remember those days. Again, walking Lancaster Street was a ghost town. Most of the city was a ghost town. Those traffic surveys that they have and are using as reference are nil and void. They need to do a traffic survey now. The neighborhood is overwhelmed by traffic on some days, coming down Bridgeport Road, trying to make a left-hand turn onto Lancaster. Again, as Mr. Davey has said before to me in the past, it is his busiest corner in his ward. their traffic is backed up to at least Leander Place, if not to the expressway. On General Drive, where I live, and I'm at the far end of General Drive, backing onto Bechtel Bush, the property itself, I'll see the nightmare and the eyesore from my property, looking straight out my front window. At the end of the day, I can't even get off my street. I'm involved in minor sports. I actually saw Mr. Vanderbilt last weekend at the KMHA dinner. He was doing a great job there. I also coach girls softball. I play a lot of times at the Bridgeport Diamonds across the Bridge Street Bridge. When I have to leave for a ball game to go do my community support at 6 o'clock in the evening or 5:45 in the evening, I can't get off my street without basically taking my life in my hands. The traffic at the roundabout does not stop. It comes up Lancaster Street. Recently, with the delayed Bridge Street closures, that traffic is tenfold. With Mr. Litt wanting to put 1,200 units in there with 0.7, which I think was changed to 0.6 parking spots per unit, the overflow suggestion is on General Drive and Lang Crescent. That is not acceptable. He wants to put a development up like this, and you guys like to let that go ahead. He has to be self-contained. It's not going to happen. Lang Crescent now, I believe, is completely no parking down one whole side of the street. They've already taken the first step. General Drive hasn't. We're going to be overrun by vehicles. The building that he has up there right now, I believe it's 528. I've drive by there. I've been doing my own little surveying because I know the parking is going to get out of control. And no matter how much they are trying to impose and suggest biking and public transit, there are no bike lanes. Zero. The transit system goes nowhere. We have one bus route, basically, maybe two, that go nowhere. This type of development is suited for along the Ion route. That's what that was built for, is for commuters. He wants to promote the fact we don't need parking spots for this unit and this building because people are going to commute. There is no commuting around that area. There's nothing there. So they're going to drive cars, they're going to park cars. The building that's there now at 528, I drive by at 10:30 on my way home from the rink, and there's an average of at least 30 to 40 cars in that parking lot. That building is more than half empty, in my opinion. Again, I don't have stats on that. I'm just going by the blacked out windows that never have lights on in that building. Also, the low-income housing that's at the corner of Bridge Street and Lancaster, where the Knox Presbyterian Church used to be. Mr. Litt, in the previous Zoom meetings, kept referring to that as the church. It's not. It's low-income housing. That property there alone has an average of 30 cars in that parking lot. I think there's only 100, I believe it's 120, no, so that's the other one. Again, there's not even that many units, really. And at the end of the day, that building is low-income housing, but they all still have cars. It's becoming a parking nightmare and a traffic nightmare down in that neighborhood. Again, with the deer and the wildlife, yes, they are all in my backyard. I back onto Bechtel Bush. I have a dozen deer at my fence normally on a daily. Foxes, coyotes, everything else. You see the bald eagles flying over. I've had one sit in my tree. You see ospreys, blue herons. You see everything there. It is an ecosystem, and putting a density building up like this, it's not going to survive there. It definitely isn't. Moving the buildings that they've suggested now, the century homes or the historical homes, moving them to Bridge Street, even the artist's rendering that they showed today, you're looking at the end of one building. They're so set back, and they say they can see it from Bridge Street roundabout. I don't believe you'll be able to unless it's the dead of winter when all those trees along Laurel Creek have no leaves on them. You won't even see them. They're just basically out of sight, out of mind at that point. Again, I don't have as much to lose as a lot of people here do, but I think our little community that we have can't be overrun, can't be turned into a downtown core without the proper infrastructure that we need to be able to survive or have a building and property of this magnitude there. Thank you.
Again, if you can please refrain from, yes, you can wave if you like. Any questions? No, there are no questions. Thank you very much, Ryan. Next up is Victoria Kent.
Oh, actually, I'm okay. I don't need to speak.
Okay.
But I do have one little comment. I'm having a lot of trouble hearing. I can't hear what's being said in this room. Does anyone else have that?
Yes, that is one of the problems of this chambers with a little bit outdated speakers, so that's something that we're endeavoring to improve, but we'll just try to remind the delegations to speak up a little louder and motion to Madam Clerk as well and see if she can make any improvements on the volume also. And I have a habit of mumbling, that's not making it easier, so my apologies for my part.
I can't hear you, so.
Those I can. All right, next up, so Victoria, I think you're presenting Melissa Bowman.
I'm
I'm not usually accused of being too quiet, so hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Good afternoon, Council. It seems fitting to be here today after having just returned home from a conference in Calgary on quality built environments. While I have a lot of thoughts running through my head about what makes a quality environment, there are a couple of key issues that I want to address that relate to this proposal, but also to general city building as a whole. Having read through the comments from residents and many of those who spoke today, most of them seem to revolve around traffic. And I understand those concerns. Most councillors have heard me speak here about various traffic issues and the need to build strong alternatives so not everyone has to rely on a car to fully access our city. A recent Record headline about a different proposal stated that concerned area residents say the project will increase traffic headaches in an already saturated area, and that pretty much sums up the feedback council often hears as new developments, such as the one today, are proposed. While it's common practice and perhaps prudent planning to require traffic studies on all new developments, it's important to remember, as author Bill Lindyk says, a traffic study makes assumptions about what's valued and what counts. And for generations, we've acted under the assumption that rush hour is the most important time of day. And that leaves a lot of other factors out of the picture. If we want to truly create complete streets and walkable communities, then it's important to plan well for those outside of vehicles as well. Again, Bill Lindyk says that the basic trade-off is that focusing myopically on the peak hour traffic means that the traffic for a driver is more valued than the all-day, everyday quality of life for the people living or walking in the neighborhood. It also assumes that cars and people go together, like they're almost the same thing. Urbanist Addison Del Mastro says that people cause traffic only if you force them to rely on cars. And the more we separate and isolate everything, the more people will end up causing traffic. He reminds us that density doesn't cause traffic, distance does. So, in order to dilute traffic, we dilute development, which intensifies traffic, which intensifies the desire to dilute development, and so on. Of course, density alone does not create good community. We must be intentional about building needed services and desired amenities as well. With that in mind, I'd urge the developer to go over and above any tree replacement guides, maybe including community garden spaces too, to show both this neighborhood and the development industry as a whole what good environmental stewardship can look like. I'd love to see more bike storage as well. As a resident of a multi-residential building, I know that bike storage is always in high demand. Though I can't help but think that cycling demand may have been even higher in this development if our local councils had voted in support of creating AAA cycling infrastructure in this area by closing the Lancaster ramps. Given this proposal is for an area that is served by 2 transit routes, though, I'm very supportive of reduced parking requirements. I can't speak to the issue of moving current housing to a new location, other than that seems like a huge task, and one that I can only assume will add to the cost of this project, and therefore to the housing itself. I do appreciate that this proposal is for purpose-built rental, because I believe that's a huge need in our community, and due to the challenges in bringing such housing to market, we simply don't have many developers building it. The report mentions that the developer is in talks with current tenants of the buildings here, and I hope that's accurate. There were some concerning comments by a delegate that I hope council addresses. I eagerly await the anticipated staff report that hopefully identifies ways that the city can better support those facing potential displacement. And while it's important to hear from nearby residents of this proposal, we must also remember who we don't hear from in these discussions, future residents, the people who need housing that could potentially move here. I believe that perspective is also valid, but too often underrepresented at these meetings. We know we need more housing to accommodate the housing needs of everyone in our community. Providing denser housing along transit routes is an important way to do exactly that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bowman. I don't see any questions.
Thanks.
Up next, we have Ms. Knox. Pardon me, sir? There's still a lot more to come. Miss, I think that's virtual, sorry. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Ms. Knox.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone in council and in office there for allowing us to speak. First off, I would like to raise an initial concern at the meeting. Today was at 3 p.m., during which many people who would contribute, both homeowners and business owners, are working. My workplace was gracious enough to allow me to shift my workday so I could attend. I'm sure this is not the case for many I'm sure this is the case for many that would have wanted to be involved. They may not have had work allow them to leave. Communications did not include the time of the meeting nor ways to participate, especially if they did not have access to the internet. So I just wanted to raise that concern. I, along with my neighbors, attended the neighborhood meeting in January 2022. We expressed concern over the number of buildings, their proposed heights, and how they didn't fit into the feel of our historic and unique community of Bridgeport. Although we expressed disbelief, hearing the traffic studies concluded there would be no impact due to the increased traffic along Lancaster, especially since those were done through COVID. Please understand that I'm aware that development along Lancaster is inevitable, more so now due to the recent property transactions along Lancaster. Many of the structures and businesses from the Bridge Street roundabout along Lancaster to Bridgeport Road have been there for 60+ years. While some may look a little tired, there is great pride in being located in this older community. This corridor has long been ignored by the City of Kitchener, with little to no assistance to individuals or businesses to modernize or upgrade their building facades. Roadways and sidewalk maintenance is overdue, as the sidewalks along Lancaster present many tripping hazards due to unevenness and cracks. Many people will choose to walk on the non-sidewalk side of Lancaster, as crossing the road is more treacherous than walking on rough ground. However, the path that the City of Kitchener is taking is drastic and not acceptable to the residents that call it home. In our January 2022 meeting, there was a general outcry and concern of having buildings approved that exceed the height of your own mixed-use designation policy. In your own words, mixed-use designation allows for a new, appropriately scaled development that uses primarily serve the surrounding area and should be compatible with surrounding low-rise neighborhoods. As a resident in one of the low-rise properties directly facing this proposed monstrosity of urban design, I can tell you that it does not look nor feel like it is symbiotic or compatible to the neighborhood, to the neighboring areas. In fact, my understanding is that the allowance is only 8 stories in a mixed-use designation. How then, when we complained about the planned approval of a 26-story structure, have you entertained the adjustment of the zoning bylaws, allowing an increase to 34 stories, 4 times the current allowable height? Even with you hiding the largest buildings to the back of the property and incorporating a pedestrian scale street side base, they will still be an eyesore to the surrounding community. In addition to the increased height, you have reduced the proposed parking spaces for residents and have not indicated what percentage of low-income housing will be including in the new proposal. That is, after all, the reason to push this development, right? There is no current plan to include green space on your development footprint other than rooftop patios and balcony space. What about school considerations? There is concern from the school boards for transportation of students to neighboring schools. Bridgeport School is within walking distance, but I would be hesitant as a parent to allow my child to walk down Lancaster Street, to Shirk Street, or through the roundabout to get to school. It's just not safe due to current traffic conditions. Many people use Bridge, Lancaster, Bridgeport Road, Riverbank as their main transit corridors to travel between Waterloo North, Uptown Waterloo, downtown Kitchener, Reslov, Bloomingdale, and onwards to Guelph. It is indeed the hub of it all. But if you live here, you know that traffic starts to build on Lancaster at 5 a.m. and gets increasingly more congested between 7:30 and 9 a.m. Anyone from General Drive or Lane Crescent who, like me, want to turn out of my driveway, either with or against traffic, know that we need to wait a sufficient amount of time for a small break in the traffic, wait for a kind driver to allow you out, or like many, gun it into traffic, hoping that life and limb are still intact when you make it to your lane. Same in reverse, trying to get home. Over the years, Over the years, my husband was rear-ended at least twice trying to turn into our driveway on Lancaster, as have many of our neighbors. I have been honked at because I refuse to allow space for drivers to squish past me while I wait to make a turn into my driveway. On several occasions, cars have jumped the curb to get around me, and I have almost been hit by traffic that speeds around the GRT bus, picking up passengers at the bus stops. Past construction had me trapped in my driveway on Lancaster due to construction vehicles digging holes or transport trucks waiting for offloading of building materials. Road closures caused concern about whether fire and emergency vehicles could make it to me or to others over the bridge in sufficient time to save a life or structure. All types of vehicles use this corridor: personal vehicles, mid-sized transport trucks, bicycles. The traffic is fast and unforgiving. However, with proposed construction of this new development being labeled as complete and compact community, I can only see additional challenges to the traffic issues. Residents of the complex will need to enter and exit a parking garage directly from Lancaster Street, waiting for garage doors to open to allow them access.
Angela, if you can try to summarize, please. You're a minute over your 5 minutes. If you can just help to summarize, please. You can finish your sentence off. I'm just trying to say if you can try to summarize.
Traffic will be present for all hours of the day due to retail allowances. For this magnitude of construction, I foresee more long-term issues of this nature. Even if it is increased pedestrian traffic, there is increased concern for safety of these pedestrians, as road traffic will definitely increase. And I do see those that with mobility issues definitely having issues crossing Lancaster and crossing Bridge. The landing spaces on those two locations it's not acceptable. There are many concerns that are not being addressed within this time allotment, such as environmental impact for both ecological aspects and wildlife. I do have an additional question regarding 560 Lancaster Street, and I maybe can take that offline with the developers later on, just in regards to the proposed separation of Building E and 560 Lancaster is only 47% compliant, so they've reduced the space between that residence. As I feel a long-time resident of Bridgeport, I feel my enjoyment of the place I have chosen to live is being ignored. Why is it that developers with big pockets can adjust to any bylaw required for them to profit with a long-term homeowner shut out? As of now, I will lose my skyline, my sunrises and mirrises, and again, increased noise and light pollution. I also expect that I will have an increase in trespassers as the development residents will see my green space off of Lang as a dog park, community space, and playground.
Okay, Angela, so we'll see if there's any questions from the committee. Thank you. I think we do get the concerns that you have laid out, and we'll try to get clarity through the committee members from staff from the points that you have made. I'm looking to committee to see if they have any questions. I don't see any, so I appreciate you presenting, and as you have already pointed out, that there can be further conversations offline, as I can realize you have more to say and more questions that you have, and our staff will endeavor to answer those, and I'm sure the proponent can try to fill in some of the gaps with some of your concerns that you have addressed. So thank you very much for presenting. We have up next Walter Mozinko. Welcome, Walter. You have 5 minutes. Yes, please. And the clock in front of you goes upward, so when you see it, circling back from 0, that means you've gone past your 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm aware of it. Councilors and mayor and whoever is here. First of all, I'm not in agreement with this development, none whatsoever. What hasn't been mentioned yet, I mean, the problems of the streets that's coming into, whatever goes around there and a little roundabout, is immense. Now, there's one bridge, and that's built in 1934, and the indigenous people have the right. You cannot build a new bridge that hasn't been addressed yet. So how long do you think this bridge is going to last with all that traffic, construction traffic, et cetera, et cetera? The other thing is, there's coming the expressway in and out of this area, Lancaster and all that. Also, there's the train coming down. If the train shuttles around, you have to turn Lancaster into a parking lot if it takes a while. So I think you should consider that really, really, really carefully, and I would suggest you do not accept that development. A development like this has been built in Waterloo, the Burial Yard, and it just looks like sardine can city to me. But I have another plan. What if the city takes some responsibility and have a look at it at the golf course there? They have an 18-hole golf course. Maybe they could make 5.5 acres available and have it built there. So let the city pull their own weight once in a while instead of the citizens, and make Bridgeport a community, modernize it, make it an upscale community where people want to live. And on their 5.4 or 5.4 acres, build affordable housing and maybe small rental apartments, and you have enough room also for parking. That's my opinion. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, that's very short.
No, we appreciate that, especially
Yes.
today. I don't see any questions of you. Thank you again for presenting.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Next up we have is Ursula. No? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Craig Brown. Mr. Brown, welcome, and again, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My wife and I live on Springdale Drive, which comes off of Lang Crescent, so again, we're not directly impacted by this construction. However, we are affected in that it does increase traffic. I'm speaking specifically on behalf of our house and 4 other houses in the area that have spoken to me about this, that are opposed to this development as laid out, in that it does not adequately address what we think is the biggest issue, would be traffic, has been raised by a number of people. I would question if the zoning bylaws are not deviated from, would this be a viable project? If not, then I would suggest it's not a viable project. And I know from the previous meeting that I attended, the idea was to increase the use of public transit and bicycles. I would ask the people that are using public transit now, how's that working, given the current strike? And is the city willing to do anything to help eliminate that as a possible inhibition, the right word, keep it from happening again, keeping the traffic from, the transit from going on strike again. The other concerns we have all been raised before. I just wanted to speak to let you know that there are many people on Springdale Drive as well that are concerned about this development and the increased traffic and other issues that go along with it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. I see no questions. Thank you for presenting and keeping it short. Next, we have Aaron Bast. Aaron, welcome, and again, 5 minutes.
Thanks. I'll be a lot shorter than that. You heard a lot of different perspectives today from a lot of different folks, and I think the common theme is this warrants a lot of consideration, in my opinion. We've got an area that has built heritage, cultural heritage, and natural heritage here. This is a great asset for this community to think about long-term, not just this site, but what we can do in this neighborhood. And all we're thinking about today is this site. And we're not thinking about the bigger picture and how we can turn this asset into something that is primed for the city of Kitchener for a long time to come. Once this development is done and approved, even if the traffic impact is viable for this, I can tell you it won't be viable for the next development that we can put in this area. We will not be in a position to support the furtherance of this community and make it a solid, long-term asset that we are proud of, there will be an island of one development here, and that will stand alone. We need to think bigger and beyond that, and because of the built heritage and the natural heritage and the cultural heritage of this neighborhood, it warrants a community or neighborhood plan, a secondary plan, just like Belmont Village did. This is a corridor, but it is not a corridor like Highland and Westmount. Once we do this and we make this decision, it's done. There's nothing else that we can do for this neighborhood. We can't take it lightly. The city and you folks as councillors look forward and say, maybe there's not that much we can do because we're going to be overturned when this goes up. But there is. There's a heritage home on that property that you guys get to make the decision on. There's the ability to put a secondary plan or neighborhood plan in place that we can work with all of these constituents on, as well as the developer to help put some housing on that site. But we cannot do this stuff in isolation. We cannot do this under the pressure of we must hit an affordable housing quota for houses that aren't frankly that affordable. We need to stop and think about what this neighborhood is going to look like in the future. We need to come together as a community, and we need to spend some time thinking about this neighborhood and the vision behind it. Not this site, not the ramp at Lancaster, not the fact that it's a corridor. We need to think about this neighborhood. I'm third generation here. I moved my family to this neighborhood because I saw the vision and the potential. This could help realize and be part of it, but not in the form that it's in. So let's pause and think about this. Let's take the requisite time to come up with a neighborhood and secondary plan and go through the motions here. Use the powers that are in your control to give due process to this thing. We'll meet all these quotas. All of this takes a long time to fix. We can get all this housing in this neighborhood. We can do it in a smart way. Let's not take the easy way. That's it for me.
No, thank you very much. Loud and clear. There's no questions.
Okay.
All right. Next up is, and my apologies, I'm not really able to read the handwriting very well. It's Jarima? Jarima, yes. Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Welcome, y'all. My name is Garima, in case you didn't know. A lot of you do. I'm a musician and an artist. I've been going to Alicia's apartment to break bread, to do music, to create music, to eat food, to have fun time, to create stuff that is beautiful, to be outside of the apartment and be in around the fire and just having the space of feeling like it's home. And I think the thing about having her apartment go down is whack, because it's not just a home, it's a home of an artist. It's a home of an artist who's been working hard for a long time. And I know what it's like to be an artist who has a home, who feels like, you know, I can do something in here and feels the joy. So that's just my opinion. It shouldn't go down. Do not accept it. Do not accept it.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, I was just trying to confirm on the timing with the Madam Clerk.
Oh.
So you carry on. You have, oh, you're done? Okay, all right. There's no questions, so thank you for presenting. Oh, there is now. Councillor Awoduni.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to confirm, how many artists live in the building?
There's
Okay, so several creatives live in that building. Okay, thank you.
All right, and that's everyone. Thank you for presenting. We appreciate your time. All right, with that, that's all the questions, all the delegations that have registered. There were written submissions that I have already outlined to the attention of the committee. And if you have questions of staff, you can key in now. Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. I have a few. I may have to queue back in. The first question I have is the one that I was hoping was going to be answered in this recommendation, and that's the traffic situation on Lancaster. And just for a bit of actually, you know what, I'm going to back up on that for a second. First, I'm going to ask staff if they could please highlight what happens if this council declines this application and what the alternative routes are for the developer if that happens.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the application is before committee right now. If council refuses the application, the avenue that the applicant has is to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and they have the right to do that. Similarly, if the members of the community don't like the decision of council, they can also appeal.
Okay, thank you. And can you, first off, can you give, just because again, this is, I'm sure, new to a lot of the delegates that are here today, can you give an indication of the past successes of municipalities when appealing to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
I think Mr. Stevenson would be best to answer that one.
Mr. Stevenson and Andrew, if you want to just keep your mics on, it'll be helpful. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we were aware of an article that was prepared by the Toronto Star that indicated that development proposals typically do proceed with an approval at the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, about 97% of the time, on average across the province.
So typically, all else aside, if this were to be appealed, if this council were to say no, it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal, we have approximately a 3% chance of winning statistically.
Statistically based on, yes, I forget the horizon that was looked at, but it was over a period of years.
Okay, and last question on this line. With the current rules, are there any potential financial costs to the municipality if we turn this down and it goes to the OLT?
Yes, the city could be liable. There could be an award against costs. We have not seen that yet in Ontario, but should an appeal be found to be vexatious or frivolous or not properly supported, the legislation did change last year to allow a successor to award financial penalties against the opposing side.
Okay. I just think that context is important because residents often think we have the final say in these things, and we do not. On to the traffic issue. The part that concerns me by far is the gray cloud over this is the region. We understand we're having a holding provision, basically saying the region, my understanding in the history is originally the region wanted a middle turning lane because frankly a lot of people on General Drive and Lang can't get off of their street currently. What I read was essentially the region's concerned about the cost and this is supposed to be approved at some later point. What happens if they can't solve it if it's not approved?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if the transportation question cannot be adequately resolved to the satisfaction of the region, this development will not proceed.
Okay, and does that, regardless, because it's a holding provision, would those conditions come back to this council for approval?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the lifting of the holding provision would be done through a zoning bylaw amendment, and it's basically, the staff recommendation would be the condition has been cleared. Council, please remove the holding provision. And yes, council would have the option to not lift it or to lift, but again, there'd be an appeal mechanism if the condition is fulfilled and council doesn't lift.
Okay, so my concern, and I don't know if you can provide any insight on the region's plans, but again, last I heard there was that middle turning lane, and as this council is aware, the region is undertaking reconstructing Lancaster in its entirety, except the most unfortunate part is everything to do with alternative transportation. It literally stops at Bridgeport Road. It does not go down Lancaster towards the roundabout. So are we aware of any anything at all the region is planning to do to alleviate the traffic conditions here?
So we actually have regional staff here that can perhaps speak to that question. Paula Slowicki is in the audience, and she's able to respond to that, if that's acceptable.
That's excellent, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that would be helpful. I think this is really beneficial for the committee and those in attendance to hear a better clarity from regional staff, as Lancaster is a regional road. I may have some difficulty with the number of mics, but I'll do my best. Oh, it's working. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The region has a special study that we're going to be undertaking over the next few years from Bridgeport Road to Shirk Place, Bridge Street, to look at active transportation and potentially a multi-use trail on one side of Lancaster. And what will happen with this is it'll connect to the AAA All Ages and Ability facilities that are going to be, that are planned on Bridgeport and Herb, as well as on most of Lancaster, except over the highway where there won't be. We're trying to connect, the region's plans are to connect the active transportation in the area.
Is a third lane on Lancaster off the table at this point?
We have asked the developer to come back with a plan to show us if that is possible, to put a two-way left turn lane in there along with the active transportation facilities. As you know, though, it might be a challenge given the right-of-way through there.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, I realize I'm way over time. I'm going to queue back in. I do have some questions regarding the...
Do you have quite a few, or?
Quite a few, yes.
Do you have more questions for the regional staff, or?
No, I think that's been covered.
Okay, good. If you want to stay there, just in case other committee members might have some questions of you as well. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Just a couple of questions. Will there be an ecological assessment of that area? I've heard a lot of, there's lots of wildlife there, and so do we plan, or can we do an ecological assessment of the affected wildlife around there?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, we have undertaken a tree preservation enhancement plan. An EIS is the appropriate study that Councillor Deneau is speaking about, and that was not a requirement of this particular development application, based on the assessment of the senior environmental planner. But a tree plan was conducted.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just as we have done an ecological evaluation citywide as part of the natural heritage system implemented through a 2014 official plan. Council will recall that earlier this year you implemented new zoning to protect all of those areas as natural heritage. So we will continue to evaluate that and update that work through our next official plan, but it wouldn't be typical to have that on a site-specific basis.
Okay, and my last question, because it's so close to the Grand, do we have to do any consultation with our Indigenous community?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is not something that we currently undertake as part of the usual typical review. If we get questions from the Indigenous community, we certainly respond to those and involve them, but we didn't receive that request through this particular application and did not circulate them specifically on this application.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I mentioned this earlier to Mr. Litt, the transit around there. Are there buses that go down that road?
Yes, there are two local bus routes that go along Lancaster Street, the number 5 and the number 6. The number 5 connects to Uptown Waterloo, where there's a direct connection to the LRT system.
Okay, thank you.
All right, online we have Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman, once you try to speak close to your mic, we've been having a lot of challenges of hearing the online delegations, so do your best so we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry I arrived late at the meeting, so some of my questions may have already been answered. My first question has to do with the sustainability statement. There's reference to it, but I don't see it anywhere in the documentation.
So through you, Mr. Chair, a sustainability statement was reviewed as part of this development application, And typically, we get a more detailed sustainability statement as part of the future site plan phase. But yes, we can provide that with you. I'm surprised it's not on the planning application's website. But we can certainly provide that to you if you're interested in it.
Yeah, I think it's very important to, before we even vote on this. The other question I had was regarding a statement in the report that says, it refers to the 5 high-rises seen from the perspective of the river. So imagine going down the river in a canoe or kayak and you look up and you see 5 high-rises. And it refers to this as creating visual interest. It seems like a very odd thing to say, and I just wondered if you could explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Again, please allow staff to answer the question.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So right now, you do see one of the 5 buildings. It is visible from the bridge. I think creation of a streetscape is what one would expect from living in a city. And right now, Bridgeport does not have a clearly defined skyline or streetscape, and this development would certainly contribute significantly to the skyline and create a different character within the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Next, my question has to do with the actual zoning of the property. So as we know, this is not an NTSA area. And so increasing the density in this area is not part of our plan. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the zoning that we currently have on the property, which is with FSR of 1 to 4 and a maximum 8-story building, was actually finalized in 2019. So this doesn't date back to the 1985 or the 20.
Through Crosby, the new update through Crosby.
Well, it's not the, okay, it's the Crosby, it's not the older version of the zoning bylaw, sorry. My head isn't all together today. But I was just wondering, so we're already tearing apart the Crosby 2019 and not respecting all the work that was put into that at this stage? I'm just a bit puzzled at how it's happening with this new Crosby zoning bylaw. So soon in the process.
The applicants have the ability to apply for an official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment at any point in time following the passing of a bylaw by City Council. We look at these on a site-by-site basis. We evaluate them on their own merits. In this particular case, there was a site-specific provision applied at some point between the original application of the zoning and the present day. And so the applicant has the right to be able to apply for whatever they want, as many times as they want, technically.
Okay, my next question has to do with the heritage cultural value of this property. Maybe you can speak to that a bit more. We talk about the buildings themselves, but if you take the number of trees, and I understand many of them are very mature, old trees, could you just sort of give us an overview of that heritage cultural value, both of the 2 buildings that are up for moving and the property itself?
So I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but the 2 houses that are on the site that have heritage interest were constructed in the 1870s. They have been identified by our heritage planners as having cultural heritage interest. They're not listed or designated on the Ontario Heritage Register or under the Heritage Act. That is something that we may contemplate if and when the houses are moved, when they make it to their destination at 26 Bridge Street, that we may look at listing the properties under the Heritage Act because of the exterior heritage attributes of the property. Does that answer the question? Sorry, of the buildings themselves, yes.
Councillor Chapman, I think, was referring to the natural landscape.
I'm referring to the additional part would be about the landscape itself. Thanks, Councillor Stan.
So again, through the tree management plan, our senior heritage planner reviewed the plan that was submitted and determined that in this particular case, basically removal of all of the trees on site is acceptable. We will be looking at compensation plantings in the order of $58,000. Further review will be undertaken at the site plan stages.
Councillor Chapman, if you can just, there's a few, but do you have quite a few or just one more?
Oh, one more very quick question, it's really clarification.
Go ahead.
So in response to an earlier question, is it correct to say that the Indigenous community was not consulted with this development, even though it's like basically on the banks of the Grand?
The Indigenous community is a question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm fortunate to be on a team that is building relationships and foundations, and as early as last week, we're starting to develop criteria for how we engage with our Indigenous communities, what they're interested in reviewing, and how we're going to continue to work together. So that work is building on relationships that were formed as part of the regional official plan, and we have our full intents to continue to build those relationships and engage with all of our Indigenous communities. We're doing the work now to figure out exactly what scale of interest all Indigenous communities have and tailoring different processes to suit everyone's needs. So very important work, and we are starting it, but we're not ready to implement it yet.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have about 3 more people. I just have to remind the delegations in attendance. We do get that this is a very passionate subject matter. You live in the neighborhood. This is going to impact your lives, and you're here and with that interest. Our staff in attendance are providing their expert opinion. They don't have any personal bias or personal interest in this as to how the development proceeds. They're providing their professional opinion to this council. I respect and value that you may disagree, and that's why it's an opportunity for this committee to hear from you, and we have heard. It's also an opportunity for you to engage with staff, and I'm quite confident staff will endeavor to answer further questions that you may have if you very much disagree with the assessment that's being provided through this session. But it makes it, I can understand, it makes it very challenging to staff if there are emotions expressed as they're speaking, as they're trying to do their job. So I would just respectfully ask the delegations to refrain to the best of your ability. And again, we want to make sure that we try to keep a respectful decorum of this process. Mr. Purnell, you were motioning something.
Yes, thank you. So just to add on to my previous response, so the sustainability statement that Councillor Chapman asked about is included on the planning applications website. It is contained within the planning justification report. So it is there, it's just within another document.
Thank you. Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I know in the feedback from residents, Langs Drive does not have a sidewalk. Is there a plan in the near future to improve the street to ensure safety of residents walking?
Mr. Cronkite, you will, yep, there's a mic available. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. At this time, there's no immediate plan to upgrade Land Crescent. It is a very quiet, sleepy street. It does not have sidewalk on either side, but the current cross-section of the roadway is of a rural nature, so in order to install sidewalks, it would take a full reconstruction.
Can that be considered? I think we're moving from rural to urban in a matter of meters, and so maybe that's something that I think to hear residents' concern would be helpful to kind of take back perhaps and return to us with some further assessment. Is that possible?
So through the chair, what I can tell you is that we have an infill priority list. That work has been done previously. And Land Crescent, again, it would fall very low on that list in terms of needing sidewalk infill. There are many other areas in the city that would be of a higher priority at this point.
Okay, the other question I have is, I know in the past, like, displacement continues to come up at council, and I know in the past we've kind of, is there a way to follow up with the displacement concerns raised by residents from a city perspective, so we can ensure that we keep this as a priority in our site plan and our next steps with the proposal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the accommodations for existing tenants is not a direct planning consideration under the Planning Act. However, it is something that we do try to do regardless, try to facilitate the conversation with the applicant, and that's what we did. We reached out to Mr. Litt and Pierre Chauvin and discussed what's the plan, what are we going to do, how can we help the existing tenants, and they responded thankfully and said that they are going to have conversations, which I think they have had conversations with some of the tenants, and that's a positive move, but we cannot mandate those types of accommodations through the planning review or through the any planning conditions.
I guess my request is that you continue that work. You know, I think it's a priority for us as a city that we ensure everyone has a place to live and that we aren't displacing people and prioritizing one income or bracket over another when we grow. Sorry, Mr. Stevenson?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe we did hear two different perspectives of that exact topic today, and I think if council wishes, we can follow up and speak directly with the delegates as well with the developer to understand. It doesn't seem to be alignment, and we can make sure that we have the most current accurate information if you like, and it can report back before council by email.
That would be great. I think the biggest harm is ecological, of course, and that's a bigger conversation, but the harm for folks who are losing their homes, to me, is the most tragic a consequence of growing as a city, and we should mitigate that. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, for following up on that concern.
I'm going to minus that from your comments time, just for that bit. Mr. Litt, just for the interest of, because this committee did make a comment, if you don't mind, can you, so we can hear it, we can go on the record that some of the concerns addressed by the current occupants of that site who have not heard, perhaps, there hasn't been adequate communication as they're concerned, that you will endeavor to have your organization reach out. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, we checked the records. We attempted to reach out, but people are busy, and we get that. So absolutely 100%. We'll continue the discussion.
Thank you. Yep. Tiffany, so you heard it. Hopefully that will be an opportunity today. All right. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. For regional staff, thank you for coming. The active transportation study is set to be done in the next few years. With this development coming, is there any chance that could be moved up so we could have some assurance sooner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That study is going to be happening over the next few years. It's called an integrated mobility plan, but the network in this area specifically will be, the main network is on Lancaster. So that's going to be constructed over the next few years, so you'll be able to go along Lancaster from this area on a AAA facility, so that's a separated cycling facility, very different than an on-street bike lane, very much more comfortable, as well as on Bridgeport and Herb Street. You're going to be able to travel along there in a separated facility and reach uptown in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes on a bike. So
Okay.
the network in the area is being completed.
Okay, and I have concerns about the safety for students going to Bridgeport School. Is that going to be addressed as well? I know that's not all on Lancaster, but also on Bridge.
In this area, we were just looking at the collisions through you, Mr. Chair. There is not a lot of collisions in this area. Currently, right now, the traffic does move slowly, as people have said. And in terms of getting kids to school, what we've done at other areas and is look at the development, and I believe it's a city duty to, if there is a crossing guard needed at the roundabout, or what needs to be happening. So that's something that will be assessed as the development comes online through, maybe Mr. Cronkite can add to that.
Mr. Cronkite.
So through the chair, I think the short answer here is that we would work with Waterloo Region School Travel Planning to make sure that the students at Bridgeport are getting to school safely. The longer answer here is that if there are measures such as an adult crossing guard or pedestrian crossings or whatnot needed to be able to facilitate that, we would look at that time.
Okay, that's great. And it was brought up about the roundabout. I don't know, Mr. Cronkite, if we have stats on the number of collisions that have happened in that roundabout and maybe where that roundabout would rank in terms of safety for throughout the city and maybe the region.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the roundabout currently is not in the top 100 intersections in our latest collision report. As well, there's been about 45 collisions in that area over the last 5 years. There's only resulted in 2 minor injuries, and no pedestrians and no cyclists have been involved.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Davey, back to you again.
Yes, so thank you. First of all, thanks to Councillor Clancy and yourself, Chair, for just bringing up the displaced residents. That was going to be my next line of questioning, so we should have that tied up, hopefully. My question to staff is, when there's the more recent developments that occurred, there was quite a bit of concern about the construction and the impacts on the local streets. Is there anything that we can do to ensure that that construction minimally impacts the area should this be approved?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, absolutely. As part of the conditions of site plan, we can require a construction management plan, which would essentially dictate the routing of any and all construction vehicles.
Okay, thank you. The last thing I wanted to touch upon was the heritage homes, or sorry, the heritage interest homes, because they're not listed nor are they designated. One idea that I was considering is the relative value of homes that are essentially going to be gutted and a shell is going to be put somewhere else, and the cost of that versus negotiating with the developer and having that cost made as a contribution to the City of Kitchener, in turn given back to the residents of the local community for like park amenities at the park at the end of General Drive, for example, perhaps down at the roundabout, even other things like perhaps further affordability compensation to the residents that are being displaced. Is that something that is within our purview? And what's I know staff's obviously defensive of the heritage interest homes, but does staff have any concerns beyond that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the preservation of the heritage homes is very important. It is within the purview of council to decide whether to demolish or whether to have the houses preserved. Staff has been working with the applicant for more than a year now to try and save these houses, in this particular case through relocation. We looked at other plans as well, such as retention on site, retention in situ, and for a number of reasons which I won't get into, relocation was looked at as the viable option. Again, demolition is possible. If council was looking to take the cost of the money saved by demolition and apply it towards community benefits, that would be something that would be done outside of the Planning Act. We couldn't create a recommendation. We wouldn't, planning staff wouldn't put forth a recommendation for that. That would have to be something that you would verbally agree to with the applicant. I don't know if you have something to add.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, certainly staff have over the last year or so have looked at this, and planning is always a balance of interests. What was brought forward tonight and outlines we think there's a possibility here to be able to retain the existing buildings with heritage interest. Should council, wish to pursue a different opportunity or an avenue, that is possible, but I would just want council to know that you planning staff always want to make sure that we're giving a recommendation that we think is good planning and is good public interest, and I would caution council to ensure that any resolution or direction to staff has that in mind.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move.
So I was going to suggest, Councillor Davey, because this is important, and I don't want the process to be rushed.
I was planning on moving deferral.
Moving deferral? Right. Okay, all right.
And hold off, and I'd like to have a brief comment as well. If we could, I know there's 100 people or so waiting for us out in the hallway, but, so deferral, I would move deferral to the council meeting, the 28th? The 29th, so it would be till the 29th. And the purpose of the deferral, first of all, I would like to get a little bit more information. I'm not, frankly, optimistic about the transportation solutions that are being proposed. I'd like to get a better understanding of what options are there. I know some residents have thrown out suggestions like traffic lights, because they literally cannot get off their street presently, and this is before this development. I do actually want to take a moment to thank all the residents for making it out today. I've spoken with nearly all of you over email probably at some point or another, and I know your concerns and I respect your concerns. But the most important reason I wanted to move the deferral as well is not only to give us opportunity to talk to figure out the displaced residents in the situation here, but also to float that idea about the absolute community benefit. In my biased opinion perhaps, I would rather see significant dollars, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, go towards the local parks, for example. I think that's more valuable to the residents in the area than having to essentially shells of homes moved down the street. But I'd like to get some community feedback on that if we could in the interim, as well as exploring the opportunity of providing some further rent incentives for those that are being displaced, as well as any other ideas that may come between now and that point in time. So for those reasons, Mr. Chair, I would move deferral to the 29th.
Thank you. There's a few that have keyed in to speak. Please, if you can focus on the timing or clarity of the deferral. Councillor O'Rooney.
Thank you. I'm in support of the deferral. I just wanted to suggest for all of us to perhaps drive through that area during rush hour or something so we can personally experience it as well. It's one thing for us to read it. It's another thing to go through it.
Thank you. Mayor Voinovich.
Thank you very much, and I'll support the deferral. I do want the discussion with the proponent to look at both the homes, but also the possibility of trying to keep the homes in some way, in addition to some additional community space being part of that conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis first. Sorry, Councillor Ioannidis had keyed in first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I will support deferral too, and I too want to encourage the proponent to, and I think they will, is to look after the residents that are living there and to make sure that there is a significant investment by you, but they're small and tiny, and I think there's an opportunity for you to work with them externally as well for other avenues. So I think there's things that you can do that will benefit the whole community.
Councillor Chapman on the timing.
Yes, thank you. I also support the deferral, and I would ask that staff reach out to the Indigenous community and get their feedback on this proposal.
Thank you. And very quickly, I also support. Yep.
On that, I mean, staff may want to respond because there's a process and a protocol in place, and our handling of this needs to be consistent with that process and protocol. So
that's fine. Again, right now we're just deferring, and I think committee members are providing their interest points. What is feasible, what is not. But do staff want to comment? Go ahead, Mr. Stevenson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would just offer the comment that we are developing relationships on how to work together with all of our Indigenous communities. We want to be respectful of those conversations. We don't want to ever put someone in a position where they feel rushed to have to respond. I would prefer if we continue to take our time, establish those relationships, so that moving forward, we're not jeopardizing any opportunity to have really meaningful conversations that look at bigger picture planning and city building objectives. We can endeavor to reach out, but I certainly would not want to bring someone in towards the end of an approval review process and feel that they're rushed to have to provide comments.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I too support the deferral. I agree with Councillor Davies' assessment that I think it's better for us to slightly delay to the council meeting, giving opportunity for, of course, the ward councillor, our staff, and the proponent to have conversations, for them to also engage with the occupants there. Unlike many other developers, you guys do have a lot of different tools at your disposal, and as Councillor Ioannidis has said, it's an opportunity for the proponent to, proceed with acts of goodwill where they may be available, and personally, I look forward to seeing what arises of that. But speaking to what Councillor Davey has said, where we do need to engage in dialogue, is about the overall community benefit. And again, there's a sense of what's in it for the wider community from the delegates and what they have said. And if there's an opportunity of, in some case, preserving the heritage component while still minimizing the substantive cost and returning that benefit to the overall community, as an example, what Councillor Davey has said, of hundreds of thousands of dollars being reinvested in the Lancaster Bridgeport neighborhood, well, why not? I think that would be if the committee proceeds to support, that would be a better process. But that's something that I think conversations will need to take forward, and that's why the deferral is important as well. Okay, with that, I'll take the motion. It has been moved by Councillor Davey for the deferral to council meeting. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Okay, so I'm going to take a motion to recess the committee. There's another item. I think we will have to recess back for 7 o'clock for the second item of, yes. Yeah, Madam Clerk, again, there's a lot of delegations out there or participants for the next item that, or the My Ideal City. If they can be informed that the item is going to get recessed for 7 o'clock, can I get a motion to defer Councillor Clancy to a recess for 7 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much.
Okay.
What's left on the agenda, and that is the zoning bylaw amendment application, draft plan of condominium application for 67 and 71 Nelson Avenue, portion of the undeveloped Tag Street right-of-way. With that, Andrew Pennell, Mr. Pennell, you are presenting. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The owner of 67 and 71 Nelson Avenue, known as 2415274 Ontario Inc., is proposing a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of vacant land condominium for the subject lands. Please note that there is a new draft zoning bylaw that is associated with the recommendation that was emailed to members of the committee at 2:01 this afternoon by Garrett Stevenson. I'll get into that further in my presentation. The subject lands are located northeast of the intersection of Nelson Avenue and Taggy Street in the Bridgeport East Planning Community. The lands consist of the lands addressed as 67 and 71 Nelson Avenue, as well as a 0.13 hectare or 1/3 of an acre portion of the undeveloped Taggy Street right-of-way that the applicant has requested to purchase from the city. The disposition of these lands was the subject of an April 17th report to Special Counsel prepared by Realty Services. Council discussed this matter and declared this parcel of land surplus. The lands are proposed to be sold to the applicant via a separate process. The lands have approximately 62 meters of frontage on Nelson Avenue and are 0.8 hectares or 2 acres in size. The lands also have 20 meters of frontage at the terminus of Sylvia Street. The lands presently contain a single detached dwelling on 67 Nelson and a single detached dwelling at 71 Nelson. The surrounding residential neighborhood to the north and west is composed of low-rise residential land uses, mainly single detached dwellings. Lots within this neighborhood vary greatly in terms of their size and shape. Dwellings in this area also vary greatly in terms of their built form and date of construction. Sylvia Park abuts the subject lands to the east. The lands to the south are used for industrial purposes and are part of a industrial park. On the screen, you'll see a plan that shows the proposed sale of a portion of the undeveloped Taggy Street right-of-way, and that's in yellow. It's outlined in yellow towards the south end of the site. A proposed easement for a noise wall is outlined in orange. That's further south. And a proposed future trail connection is outlined in red via a dashed line, and that is to be retained by the city. A future trail would facilitate access to Sylvia Park and would be developed through a separate process, as I mentioned. The owner has made application for draft plan of condominium, specifically a vacant land condominium, comprising of 23 vacant land condominium units. These are similar to lots in a plan of subdivision, but they are technically called units. Each unit is planned to contain a future single detached dwelling with an attached garage. The units range between 224 square meters and 374 square meters in area, while lot widths range between 9 meters and 13.3 meters. Proposed common elements of the condominium include a private driveway, landscaped areas, and a narrow piece of land proposed to be used for a noise wall. To facilitate the condominium and future single detached dwellings, the owner is also requesting a zoning bylaw amendment. The zoning bylaw amendment would change the zoning from residential 3 under bylaw 85-1, our older zoning bylaw, to low-rise residential 4 zone, or Res 4, with a site-specific provision and a holding provision under the new zoning bylaw, bylaw 2019-051. This approach would tailor the zoning to the proposed development concept. The main purpose of the site-specific zoning provision, and again note that there is an update since the report was prepared. The new zoning bylaw contains the following provisions: that the lot areas are to be reduced to 224 square meters minimum. The corner lot width is proposed to be reduced to 12.5 meters from 12.8 meters in the base zoning. The special regulation standardizes the front yard setback requirement to 4.5 meters. It eliminates the maximum front yard requirement that is in place for this area and other areas that are closer to the core. And it would require and this is different than the provision that is in the zoning bylaw included in the report, that there would be a requirement for a 2.4 meter high or 8 foot high fence, as well as a 3 meter buffer along the front, along the northerly property line. And there would be a limit on the building height as well for all units that front onto this, or that abut this northerly property line, of 8 meters in height, whereas the standard height in this zone is 11 meters. A holding provision is also recommended to prohibit development until a stationary noise study is completed to the satisfaction of the region of Waterloo. A site plan application was circulated to the city in 2022. At the site plan review committee meeting, the site plan was not approved, pending the outcome of the necessary land disposition decisions and necessity of the subject zoning bylaw amendment. The proposal would facilitate the redevelopment of the lands with compatible single detached dwellings on the edge of a neighborhood within a neighborhood that has a diverse character and built form. The proposal would facilitate an innovative approach to housing by allowing single detached dwellings on units within a vacant land condominium on a common element road rather than dwellings on lots that front onto a public road. The proposal would facilitate greater housing choice within the Bridgeport neighborhood. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of condominium are consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. They conform to the growth plan. They conform also to the region of Waterloo official plan and the city of Kitchener official plan, and they represent good planning. Accordingly, planning staff recommends that the revised zoning bylaw amendment be approved and that the draft approval be granted to the plan of condominium. Planning staff further requests that the committee include the following provision in its resolution since the zoning bylaw amendment has been revised: that pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, see page 13, as amended, further notice is not required to be given in respect to the zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 22/11/N/AP. That concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And with that, I also want to pinpoint to the committee that we have received a written submission from Linda Lennon, which was sent, I think, through email or other correspondence. The other delegation is Pierre Chauvin. Pierre, it's been a long day for you. Welcome back, and you know the routine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, I'd like to thank Andrew for the excellent presentation. I don't have much to say other than I support the recommendation that's before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to note, though, with the revised bylaw, that was a result of discussions we had with a neighbor following the public meeting that we had, the neighborhood meeting. I've met with them personally. We came up with a solution with respect to fencing, buffering, the building height. So that's what's reflected in the revised bylaw. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions from the committee, so that's great. Larry Musselman is joining virtually. Larry, would you like to add anything further? Your mic is off. Go ahead. We still can't hear you. Okay. Pierre, Larry is one of the proponents, right? Yes. Okay, so he's just in to speak in support of the application, I'm assuming?
I can't speak.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure if he had a prepared presentation or if he was accompanying you. So. There's a hand up. Larry, we do see your hand up, and I don't see you muted, so I'm not sure the technical difficulties are under yours. It's high tech.
Is that coming in clear?
Yeah, clear enough.
Hello?
okay, Larry?
Yep, I can hear you, and I can see you now, but I just can't see on the computer, or talk to you on the computer.
You're ready to delegate. Go ahead.
Very good. Mr. Chair, Council, Mr. Mayor, thank you for listening to our concerns. My name is Larry Musselman, and I live at 63 Nelson Ave. I'm 2 houses up from the proposed development. About 13 years ago, I purchased my property here on Nelson. What drew me to this area were the large lots, the quiet neighborhood, and the ultra-low traffic. Another benefit to this neighborhood was there was no curbs or sidewalks. That meant larger driveways, less congestion on the roads, made it easy to get around for pedestrians. I know you hear all the complaints from everybody all the time. Little things like that in a subdivision mean or they have big benefits. So along with that, before I purchased my property, I also read the Bridgeport East Secondary Plan. Now that was from 1985. In reading that plan, I felt very confident and comfortable that there would likely be only 3 places of buildup in the subdivision. The one area was behind me on Sylvia Street, where they put in 3 houses. That one I had talked to Mr. Dixon when he was planning on putting those houses in, and that's what he did. The second area is on Stanley Ave. That's between Bloomingdale Road and Schweitzer, and that one's a proposed 80-plus unit street on that one. The third possible development was at the end of Schweitzer and Lark, beside the Croatian Church. So there's considerable land here for development, which creates traffic issues. I don't agree with selling Tag Street down there, because in the proposal in the secondary plan, Tag was supposed to eventually hook up with Lark at the top end and to create the grid for the subdivision to take off excess traffic from Schweitzer Street. So it gave another exit to Stanley and another exit to Bridge Street, just via Bloomingdale Road or Schweitzer. Hang on here. So yes, with that, I'm not naive to think that there's not going to be changes in this neighborhood. I work in the construction industry. I've been doing excavation for 30 plus years, and I'm continuing to do that right now, for 37 years. So I have a really good idea what's going to happen beside me in this proposal. And it's going to be nonstop interruptions for a few years. Mud, dust, noise, the usual stuff with construction. And unfortunately, everything has to come through the outside of the subdivision to get to the heart of the subdivision, to where this is planned. And lots of talk was done tonight about the traffic with the apartment buildings on Lancaster, and the potential for the amount of cars on that is unreal. Like, that could be over 1,000 vehicles. With the potential of development in here just between Stanley Street and Nelson Street is approximately 200 new cars to the neighborhood. And with that, all that is going to happen all in a quarter-mile radius in our neighborhood. All on streets that have mostly no sidewalks and limited lighting. To me, that makes a serious safety concern for pedestrians and bicyclists. And just as a note, I noticed that at the start of the spring here, they put common barriers and reflectors up on Schweitzer and Stanley. I mean, I've never seen that in our neighborhood before, so that's just things to come, I guess. But another question I got is, with the traffic, in the Bridgeport East Secondary Plan, it said, with discussions with traffic and transportation staff of both the City of Kitchener and Regional Municipality of Waterloo, indicates that the present bridge over the Grand River has near or to capacity of volume of 10,000 vehicles per day. So that study was done in 1983. So 37 plus years later, I'm not sure why they're saying there's no issue with that traffic, because there has been a tremendous increase.
Larry, if you can start to summarize your delegation, please.
Almost 40 years.
Larry?
Yes?
The chair has asked you if you can summarize your comments. You've hit your 5 minutes.
Okay, so in closing, like I say, I expect changes, but nobody's in favor of this development. It's not wanted. It's in an existing neighborhood, a mature neighborhood. I purchased my home because of the large lots, the quiet location, and the minimal traffic and noise. And I strongly disagree that a developer should have the ability to take my reasons away for choosing to live in this neighborhood away from me, just for profit for themselves. Because it absolutely gives no benefits to the surrounding homeowners. I think that's extremely unfair. I think we can sit down and talk and see if we can come up with a better solution.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry, for presenting, and you've been heard by the committee. I see no questions from the committee to you. Thank you very much for the points that you have relayed across. With that, I'll open up the committee to questions of staff. Go ahead, Councillor Davey.
No questions of staff. I would move the revised bylaw and recommendation as proposed, and just a brief comment.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think with respect to Mr. Musselman's delegation, I do have to point out that this is one of the lower density applications we've seen recently. I do think that it does fit in with the area, especially with respect to the new demands we have in terms of the supply and demand issue. The secondary plan, again, being in 1985 as well, before the realities of the housing supply crisis that we have today, and I really do think this is the best possible development that we're going to see in this space, so I will move it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I see no one else. The item has been moved by Councillor Davey. Staff wants to add in anything further?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, may I just recommend that as part of any resolution to approve this consideration, if the intent is to approve the revised bylaw, to include language in the resolution to waive further notice pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act, and that no further notice is required for the revised bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Do you agree to what's been outlined by Mr. Stevenson?
Yes, that was my intention. Thank you. And I just wanted to quickly add as well, I do appreciate the revision as well, and I'm sure the neighbors will be happy to hear that the homes that are adjacent to them will be coming down a bit lower in hay. So thank you for that work, staff.
Okay, good. So the item has been moved. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. And that is the conclusion of all the items for the committee. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Schneider, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you.